Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving right into a seriously fascinating intersection of global trade, supply chain dynamics, and the law. Today I'm putting on my economic expert hat to look closely at the South Korean used car export market. This industry has absolutely exploded in size recently, but right now it's standing on a precarious knife's edge. It perfectly demonstrates what happens when rapid market innovation completely outpaces the legal frameworks meant to govern it. We're going to break down the legal bottlenecks, the geopolitical shocks, and the massive structural shifts that are currently reshaping this multi-billion-dollar supply chain.
Okay, let's dive right into this. We've got a clear roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the export boom. Then, the legal loophole causing all the trouble, followed by the global dual crisis, and finally, institutional solutions.
Part 1. The export boom. We are talking about explosive, truly unprecedented growth here. Projections show the market reaching an astounding 885,000 units exported annually by 2025. But, it's not just the volume that's impressive, it's the value. The average export price is surging to $10,000 per unit, so we are no longer talking about a small-scale scrapyard operation shipping out cheap, old vehicles. No, this is a highly lucrative, high-volume export industry bringing in some very serious foreign capital. From an economic standpoint, the stakes for the national economy are absolutely massive.
Looking at that massive scale, the immediate question is, how on earth did they pull that off? Well, they definitely didn't do it using the old manual methods of buying cars one by one from local lots. Instead, exporters radically shifted to digital supply chains. They deeply integrated with online Sell My Car platforms and digital auctions to secure their supply fast. Today, it's estimated that these online platforms process 1.5 to 2 times more sourcing volume for exporters than traditional offline auctions. This digital pivot unlocked incredible economies of scale. But as we're about to see, this heavy reliance on digital platforms, it's also their biggest Achilles heel.
Which brings us to part 2, the legal loophole. Right in the middle of May, a rumor struck the industry like a total thunderbolt. On May 12th, a post popped up on a major message board used by exporters, warning that export companies might actually be expelled from using these crucial online sourcing platforms. Within days, this warning spread like wildfire. It was read by over 388 companies and, understandably, caused sheer panic. Imagine running a highly efficient factory, and literally overnight, someone threatens to turn off your only source of raw materials. That is exactly what this felt like to the export market.
So what caused this panic? It was triggered by a sudden, incredibly strict reading of the existing law, the Automotive Management Act. According to a legal review, the current framework explicitly authorizes only domestic car dealers to utilize online auto trading and information platforms. Because the law hasn't been updated to reflect modern digital trade, there is a massive legal vacuum when it comes to export businesses. Legally speaking, exporters' access to these platforms actually lacks any statutory foundation. They've been using them for almost 8 years, but technically, the law doesn't even recognize their right to be there.
And this brilliantly illustrates the structural market failure we're dealing with. On one side of the equation, you have domestic dealers. They are legally recognized and enjoy unlimited access to these vital digital platforms. On the exact opposite side, you have export businesses who, remember, drive a massive portion of the national auto volume, just sitting in a legal gray area, facing total restriction from the very platforms they need to survive. This is a huge structural inefficiency. An outdated legal framework is quite literally choking a booming sector by cutting off its primary supply route.
You can really feel the frustration from folks inside the industry. As one participant noted, it felt like a vital supply route was completely blocked out of the blue and that their legal standing was completely ignored during the initial legislation. And honestly, they hit the nail on the head. When the laws governing online auctions were originally written, the export industry wasn't the absolute powerhouse it is today, so they were simply left out of the text. But this isn't just a minor oversight anymore. It's a critical vulnerability, leaving these businesses entirely helpless.
That moves us to part 3, the global dual crisis.
Now, the crucial point here is this absolutely staggering statistic, minus 92%. That is the catastrophic drop we saw in used car exports to the United Arab Emirates in just a single month recently. Yes, you heard that right, a 92% drop.
What's really interesting is analyzing the specific cause and effect here. We saw a severe volume collapse in March of 2026. Now, this wasn't a sudden dip in consumer demand. No, this was the direct result of geopolitical tensions in the Middle East, specifically the conflict involving Iran and the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. You might be wondering, why does the UAE matter so much? Well, it acts as South Korea's biggest re-export hub.
Cars land in the UAE and are then distributed across Africa and other regions. When maritime routes to the UAE are blocked, the entire global distribution network just freezes up. Furthermore, it wasn't just the UAE taking a hit. There were drastic export reductions across the broader Gulf region in the first quarter of 2026. From an economic perspective, this industry is bleeding externally due to the war in the Middle East. And that makes the internal crisis, that potential ban on using domestic digital platforms, infinitely more dangerous. Exporters are literally fighting a dual crisis right now, an external shock wiping out their primary trade route and an internal legal loophole threatening to wipe out their supply chain.
Let's pivot to part 4, the institutionalization solution. Fortunately, policymakers are finally waking up to the fact that you simply cannot run a massive export industry on legal ambiguity. There are several specific legislative efforts currently underway. First, there's a proposed Used Car Export Support and Industry Promotion Act, alongside specific administrative support ordinances in key hub cities like Incheon. Crucially, there's also a strong push, backed by representatives like Ho Jong-sik, to transition the export business to an official registration system. As an economist, I look at these not as bureaucratic red tape, but as absolutely necessary economic lifeboats. It's about finally giving this industry the proper legal foundation it needs to operate securely.
Let's map out how this actually builds a sustainable future for the market. Step 1 is legal recognition through that formal registration system we just talked about. Once you have that locked in, Step 2 naturally follows: guaranteed platform access for sourcing and new financial protections that banks can finally offer to legitimate, recognized businesses. This strong foundation then unlocks Step 3, system upgrades and market diversification. With legal certainty and real financial backing, exporters can confidently scale up. They can shift from passive operations to aggressively targeting high-value emerging markets like Eastern Europe and Central Asia, which the data shows are incredibly ripe for expansion.
The blueprint for saving and upgrading this industry is perfectly clear, and the economic potential is just huge. But the timeline is incredibly tight. So, the big question is, will these legal guardrails be deployed in time? Can domestic policy moves actually outpace the very real, immediate threats of internal supply chain loopholes and external geopolitical shocks? Honestly, the survival of an incredibly lucrative global export market depends entirely on the answer to that question. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep analyzing the data and stay curious.